The Techno-mage's Awakening. Chapter 1. The Manifestation. Chapter 1. The Manifestation. The forge burned hot in the afternoon sun, adding its heat to the already sweltering summer day. Jack Black brought the hammer down in a steady rhythm, matching the pace his father had taught him since he was old enough to hold the tool properly. Sweat dripped from his brow, sizzling when it hit the metal of the horseshoe taking shape beneath his strikes. "Easy there, Jack," John Black called from across the smithy, his weathered face creasing with approval. "You're putting too much shoulder into it. Let the hammer's weight do the work." Jack nodded, adjusting his grip. At 16 he was already broader across the shoulders than most boys his age, years of forge work having carved muscle into his frame. His black hair, tied back with a leather cord, was damp with perspiration, and his brown eyes remained focused on the glowing metal before him. "Better," John said, returning to his own project, a complex blade commission for one of the town's wealthier merchants. "You've got good hands, son. Steady. That'll serve you well at the academy." The academy. Jack's stomach tightened at the thought, though he kept his hammer strikes even. In 3 days he would leave for the Adventurers' Academy on the outskirts of Millbrook, the mid-sized town that had been his home for as long as he could remember. His mother Amanda and John had saved for 2 years to afford the tuition, determined that Jack would have opportunities beyond the smithy. "I still think I should stay and help here," Jack said, not for the first time. "Emma's only 12. The money could—" "Jack." John's voice was firm but kind. He set down his own hammer and crossed to where Jack worked. The older man was shorter than Jack now, though no less solid, his arms still thick with the muscle of decades at the forge. "Your mother and I didn't scrimp and save so you could waste your potential at a hammer. You've got your whole life ahead of you. The guild life, it's dangerous, but it's also a chance at something more." Jack wanted to argue, but he'd learned years ago that once John and his mother agreed on something, there was no shifting them. Besides, a part of him, the part he tried not to examine too closely, was excited. Adventuring meant dungeons, ancient vaults from before the collapse, filled with materials and monster cores that could sell for more than a blacksmith made in a year. It meant the possibility of pulling his family up from their lower middle-class existence into something better. It also meant magic. Today was the day. His 16th birthday. The day when human magic manifested, when he would discover what gifts, if any, the nanites that permeated every living thing had granted him. Some awakened to fire or water, earth or wind. Others found themselves with rarer gifts, life magic that could heal wounds or blood magic that could enhance the body beyond normal limits. And some, like roughly 1 in every 5 humans, manifested no magic at all beyond the small personal utilities everyone possessed. Jack had tried not to think about it too much. His mother had minor earth magic, useful for her garden but nothing spectacular. John claimed to have no formal magic beyond his personal abilities, though Jack had seen him coax metal to hold shapes that shouldn't have been possible without at least a touch of fire affinity. "Come on," John said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "Your mother's been cooking since dawn. If we're late for your birthday supper, she'll have both our hides." Jack smiled despite his nervousness. He quenched the horseshoe in the water barrel, listening to the familiar hiss of steam, then followed John out of the smithy. Their home was attached to the forge, a modest 2-story structure of stone and timber that sat on Millbrook's eastern edge. Smoke from the forge's chimney mixed with the dozens of other smithy fires that dotted the craftsman's quarter. Inside, the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread made Jack's mouth water. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and family gathering space, with a stone hearth dominating one wall. His mother Amanda stood at the work table, her brown hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a practical bun. She looked up as they entered, her face softening into a smile. "There's my birthday boy," she said, crossing to pull Jack into a hug despite the fact that he now towered over her. 16 years old. "I can hardly believe it." "Mom," Jack protested half-heartedly, but he returned the embrace. There was something in the way she held him, just a moment too long, a hint of tension in her shoulders, that made him wonder. But then she pulled back, her smile firmly in place. "Emma?" Amanda called toward the stairs. "Come down, your brother's here." A thunder of footsteps preceded his younger sister's appearance. Emma Black was all gangly limbs and wild energy at 12, her dark hair, so like Jack's own, constantly escaping whatever arrangement their mother put it in. She launched herself at Jack with typical enthusiasm. "Finally. I've been waiting forever. Did you make me something at the forge? You promised you'd make me something special." Jack laughed, steadying her. "It's my birthday, Em. Shouldn't you be making me something?" She pulled a face. I drew you a picture. It's of you fighting a dragon. Mom says I made you too handsome, but I think it's accurate. I'm sure it's perfect, Jack said, ruffling her hair and earning an indignant squawk. They settled around the table, and for a while, Jack could almost forget about the significance of the day. John told stories from the forge, Emma chattered about her friends and the upcoming harvest festival, and his mother served generous portions of all his favorite foods. It was comfortable, familiar, and safe. But as the meal wound down and Amanda brought out a small cake, a luxury that must have cost precious coin, the weight of the moment returned. They sang the traditional birthday blessing, and Jack made a wish he didn't speak aloud, that whatever magic he possessed, it would be enough to make a difference. So, Emma said as she devoured her slice of cake, what do you think you'll get? I bet it's fire magic. You're always so serious and focused like a burning flame. Emma, don't pester your brother, Amanda chided gently, but Jack could see the same question in her eyes and in John's. I don't know, Jack admitted. I'll find out at the guild hall tomorrow, I suppose. The tradition was clear. On the day after a human's 16th birthday, they would register with the Adventurers Guild. A magical analysis device would reveal their affinities, and they would receive their crystal tablet, the transparent, slate-like tool that displayed one's status and abilities. It was as much a coming-of-age ritual as it was a practical necessity. Whatever it is, John said firmly, you'll make the most of it. That's what matters. Not the magic you're given, but what you do with it. Jack nodded, but he caught the glance his parents exchanged, brief, worried, laden with something unspoken. He'd seen that look before, usually when they thought he wasn't paying attention. As if there was something they weren't telling him, some secret that hovered just beyond his understanding. Later that night, lying in his small room on the second floor, Jack stared at the ceiling and listened to the familiar sounds of home. The creak of floorboards as his parents prepared for bed. Emma's soft snoring from the room she'd recently claimed as her own, no longer willing to share with her annoying older brother. The distant bark of the neighbor's dog. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow he would know what magic the world had granted him. Tomorrow he would take the first real step toward becoming an adventurer. He pressed his hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Somewhere in his blood, in the very cells of his body, nanites swirled, the microscopic machines left over from the collapse 3,000 years ago. They were in the air he breathed, the water he drank, the food he ate. They had transformed humanity from baseline stock into something new, something that could wield what the ancients would have called magic. Jack closed his eyes, seeking sleep that was slow to come. He thought of the stories he'd heard since childhood, of brave adventurers delving into dungeons, of epic battles with monsters, of fortunes made from monster cores and ancient technology. He thought of his family and the chance to give them a better life. He thought of tomorrow and wondered what the nanites had made of him. Sleep finally claimed him as the moon rose over Millbrook, and in his dreams Jack walked through corridors of crystal and steel, where ancient machines hummed with forgotten purpose, and something vast and patient waited to be found. Chapter 2: The Guild Hall. The Adventurers Guild Hall stood in Millbrook Central District, a three-story structure of gray stone that had weathered centuries of use. Unlike the newer buildings around it, the hall bore the marks of age, smooth steps worn concave by countless feet, walls mottled with lichens that no amount of cleaning could fully remove. It was a piece of the world's history, built not long after the collapse when humanity had needed organization to survive the new reality of monsters and dungeons. Jack approached the wide front steps with his mother on one side and John on the other. Emma had begged to come, but John had been firm. This was a moment for family, not spectacle. Even so, Jack could feel eyes on them. Registration days always drew attention as townsfolk wondered what new talents would emerge, what potential adventurers might bring glory, or at least commerce, to Millbrook. Nervous? Amanda asked quietly. No, Jack lied. His mother squeezed his arm. Whatever happens, we're proud of you. You know that, don't you? Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. There was that look again in her eyes, that mixture of pride and worry and something else he couldn't name. But before he could ask, they reached the heavy oak doors and John pushed them open. The interior of the guild hall was bustling despite the early hour. The main chamber was a vast space, its high ceiling supported by massive timber beams. The walls were covered with notices, dungeon reports, monster sightings, commission requests, and the ever-present bounty boards. Adventurers in various states of armament lounged at tables or stood in small groups, their conversations creating a low hum of noise. At the far end of the room, behind a long counter of polished wood, several guild receptionists worked. Jack could see stacks of paperwork, crystal tablets glowing with information, and the various devices used for guild business. One of the receptionists, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, caught sight of them and beckoned. "Registration?" she called, her voice cutting through the ambient noise with practiced ease. Jack nodded and made his way to the counter, his parents following a respectful distance behind. Up close, he could see that the receptionist had sharp blue eyes that assessed him with professional interest. A small nameplate on the counter identified her as Maria Hendricks, senior receptionist. "Name?" she asked, already pulling out forms. "Jack Black." "Age?" 16 as of yesterday. "Parents or guardians present?" "Yes, ma'am. Amanda and John Black." Maria's eyes flicked to his parents, and Jack caught a fleeting expression cross her face. Surprise? Recognition? But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Right then, Jack Black. You understand what registration entails?" "Yes, ma'am." "Magical analysis, status tablet issuance, and assignment of initial guild rank." "Good. You've been educated at least." She gestured toward a door to the left of the counter. "Through there, first room on your right. The analysis chamber. Strip to the waist and wait for the technician. Your parents can watch from the observation window if they choose." Jack felt his face heat slightly at the instruction, but he nodded. This was standard procedure. The analysis device needed clear access to the chest, where a person's magical core was said to reside. He glanced back at his parents, who both offered encouraging smiles, then pushed through the indicated door. The hallway beyond was quieter, lit by crystal lamps that cast a steady, white glow. Jack found the analysis chamber easily enough. The door was marked with glowing runes that spelled out "analysis" in the common script. He entered to find a circular room about 20 feet across, its walls covered in more runes that pulsed with faint light. In the center stood a raised platform, and above it hung a complex apparatus of crystal and metal that looked like nothing so much as a many-armed sculpture. "First timer?" a voice asked, and Jack turned to find an elderly man emerging from a side door. He was short and wizened, with a wild shock of white hair and eyes that seemed perpetually amused. "Don't look so worried, lad. The device doesn't bite. Tingles a bit, but nothing painful." "I'm not worried," Jack said, then added, "Sir?" "Ah, of course you're not." The old man moved to a control panel set into the wall. "I'm Artificer Tomlin. Been running this particular device for 32 years now. Seen all manner of magic manifest, from the spectacular to the mundane. You know what I've learned in all that time?" Jack shook his head. "That magic's like people. It's not what you've got that matters, but what you do with it. Now, shirt off, up on the platform. Let's see what the nanites have made of you." Jack pulled off his shirt, folding it carefully before stepping onto the platform. The stone was cool beneath his bare feet, and he could feel his heartbeat accelerating. Through a window in the wall, he could see his parents watching, and beyond them, other guild members who had gathered. It wasn't every day that a registration happened. "Arms out to your sides," Tomlin instructed. "Look straight ahead. Try not to move, but don't worry if you do, the device compensates." Jack obeyed, extending his arms. He heard Tomlin mutter something, and then the runes on the walls blazed brighter. The apparatus above him began to descend, its many arms unfolding with mechanical precision. Crystal nodes at the end of each arm glowed with different colors: red, blue, green, white, and others Jack couldn't name. The first touch was indeed a tingle, like static electricity dancing across his skin. Then the sensation intensified, spreading from the points of contact throughout his body. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was profoundly strange, as if something was reaching inside him, examining the very essence of what he was. Jack kept his eyes forward, watching through the window as his mother gripped John's hand tightly. He saw other adventurers leaning in, curious. He saw Maria the receptionist appear, her expression intense with interest. Then the tingling became a roar. Power flooded through Jack, not from outside but from within, as if something that had been sleeping his entire life suddenly woke and stretched. He gasped, and the crystal nodes around him began to pulse wildly. Two in particular blazed with impossible brightness. One pure white, one absolute black. "Impossible," he heard Tomlin breathe. In the observation room, Jack could see shock rippling through the assembled guild members. His mother's face had gone pale, while John's expression was one of stunned disbelief. The apparatus retracted suddenly, and the sensation vanished as quickly as it had come. Jack stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the platform. He felt different. Where? As if before this moment he'd been seeing the world through a fog, and now everything was sharp and clear. Life and death, Tomlin said, his voice filled with wonder. He was staring at a display on his control panel, where symbols and readings Jack couldn't interpret scrolled past. Life and death magic manifesting in equal measure. I've never seen, not in 32 years. The door burst open and Maria strode in, her professional demeanor cracking to show genuine astonishment. The readings are confirmed. Triple confirmed, Tomlin said. No doubt about it. Life magic and death magic both at significant potency. The boy's got a gift that comes along once in a generation if that. Jack barely heard them. He was staring at his hands where he could see, or feel or sense, something new. Threads of energy, invisible but undeniably present. White threads that pulsed with vitality, with growth and healing. Black threads that whispered of endings, of decay and transformation. They were part of him now, as natural as breathing. And underneath it all, barely noticeable but unmistakably there, something else stirred. Something that whispered of circuits and code, of systems and protocols. Something that had no name in his awareness, but sang to the old-world technology that lay buried in the earth of the dungeons. Can I? Jack's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. Can I put my shirt back on? That seemed to break the spell. Tomlin chuckled, though his eyes never left Jack. Yes, of course. And then we get you your tablet. Maria, inform the guild master, would you? He'll want to know about this. As Jack pulled his shirt back on, his mind raced. Life and death magic. Both. He knew enough to understand that this was exceptional. Most mages had one affinity, maybe two if they were lucky, and those two were usually complementary. Fire and earth. Water and wind. But life and death? They were opposing forces, complementary in the way that day and night were complementary. His parents were waiting when he emerged into the hallway, and his mother pulled him into a fierce hug. You're special, she whispered. You've always been special. Now the whole world will know. Mom? Let her be proud, John said gruffly, but there was a sheen in his eyes that might have been tears. It's not every day your son manifests magic that guild artificers gape at. They returned to the main hall, where word had already spread. Jack could feel the weight of attention, hear the whispers. The legendary combination. Life and death. A decade at least since the last. Within moments, adventurers were approaching, some offering congratulations, others asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Maria guided him back to her counter with firm efficiency, clearing a space despite the press of interested onlookers. From beneath the counter, she produced a case and opened it to reveal a crystal tablet, the transparent, solid material gleaming in the light. Place your hand on it, she instructed. It will attune to you specifically. Once bound, only you can access your full status information, though basic details can be shared at your discretion. Jack placed his palm on the cool crystal. The tablet flared with light, and he felt a connection establish, like recognizing a part of himself he'd never known was missing. When the light faded, he lifted the tablet and looked at its surface. Text appeared, glowing softly in amber characters. Name, Jack Black. Age, 16. Race human. Rank, G. Unranked adventurer. Magic. Life magic, Tier 2. Death magic, Tier 2. Personal magic, Techno-mage. Jack froze. Techno-mage. The word meant nothing to him, he'd never heard of such a classification. But there it was, listed as his personal magic. He glanced at Maria, but she was filling out paperwork, unable to see his personal screen. The information about his life and death magic would be in the guild records, but personal magics weren't recorded. They were considered private, individual quirks that were each person's own business. Jack carefully kept his expression neutral as he lowered the tablet. Techno-mage. Whatever it meant, he would keep it to himself until he understood it better. Congratulations, Jack Black, Maria said, stamping a form with an official guild seal. You are now a registered adventurer of G rank. In 3 days you'll depart for the academy. Given your unique magical combination, I expect you'll be someone the guild keeps a close eye on. Don't disappoint us. I'll do my best, ma'am. As they left the guild hall and emerged into the afternoon sunlight, Jack noticed his mother's face was troubled. John seemed lost in thought, his usual cheerfulness subdued. But Emma, who had been waiting outside and immediately accosted them for details, was bouncing with excitement. Life and death magic. Jack, that's amazing. You'll be famous. You'll be able to heal people and fight monsters and... Emma breathed, Jack said, but he was smiling. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and it helped drive away some of the strangeness he felt. That night, alone in his room, Jack held the crystal tablet and stared at the words glowing on its surface. Techno-mage. He tried speaking the word aloud, feeling how it shaped in his mouth. Techno-mage. Technology magic? As if responding to the question, something in his awareness shifted. For just a moment he could sense, like a distant echo, the electrical systems running through Millbrook. The guild hall's crystal lamps. The ward stones that protected the town's perimeter. The analysis device that had revealed his magic. They weren't just objects. They were systems, intricate and purposeful, and some part of him could feel their structure. The sensation faded almost immediately, leaving Jack breathless and confused. But one thing was certain. Whatever this techno-mage ability was, it was something unique. Something that perhaps no one else possessed. 3 days until the academy. 3 days until he would learn to use his life and death magic properly. 3 days before he would enter his first dungeon and discover what exactly it meant to be a techno-mage. Jack set the tablet aside and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would return to the forge and spend his remaining time at home with his family. He would practice with the short sword John had made for him, test the bow he'd been given, and prepare as best he could for whatever lay ahead. But tonight he let himself feel the weight of what had changed. He was no longer just Jack, the blacksmith's stepson. He was Jack Black, bearer of life and death magic, possessor of a mysterious ability called Techno-mage. He was an adventurer now, with all the danger and promise that entailed. And somewhere deep in his bones, Jack felt that this was only the begin. And Chapter 3, Departure. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and quiet farewells. Jack spent his mornings at the forge with John, learning last-minute tricks and techniques that might serve him in the field. His father had been subdued since the registration, though whether from pride or worry Jack couldn't tell. Perhaps both. "The bow your mother and I commissioned for you," John said on the second day, producing a leather-wrapped bundle from the back of the workshop. "I wanted to give it to you before you left." Jack unwrapped it carefully, his breath catching as the weapon was revealed. It was a recurved bow, its limbs crafted from laminated wood that showed a deep, rich grain. The grip was wrapped in supple leather, and the whole thing was sized perfectly for his draw length. It was easily the finest bow Jack had ever held. "John, this must have cost." "What it cost doesn't matter," John interrupted firmly. "What matters is that it'll serve you well. I had Marcus Fletcher make it special. That's ironbark wood reinforced with earth aspect resin. It'll last you a lifetime if you care for it properly, and it's got enough pull to punch through monster hide." Jack tested the draw, feeling the smooth resistance. "It's perfect. Thank you." John clapped him on the shoulder, and for a moment they stood there in comfortable silence, the forge fire crackling behind them. Then John cleared his throat. "Your mother wants to talk to you. Tonight after Emma goes to bed. It's important." Something in his tone made Jack's stomach tighten. "Is something wrong?" "No, not wrong. Just overdue." John's weathered face was troubled. "She'll explain. I just wanted to give you fair warning." That evening, after a supper that felt too quiet despite Emma's chatter about the harvest festival, Jack waited in the main room while his parents put his sister to bed. The autumn night had turned cool, and a fire burned in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Jack found himself pacing, unable to sit still, his new bow propped against the wall where he could see it. When his parents finally descended the stairs, they moved with the weight of people carrying a burden. Amanda's face was pale, and she twisted her hands together nervously. John positioned himself behind her, one hand on her shoulder in support. "Jack," his mother began, then faltered. She took a breath and tried again. "Jack, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid." Jack felt his pulse quicken. "Afraid of what?" "Sit down, please." Amanda gestured to the chair by the fire, and Jack obeyed, though every instinct told him he didn't want to hear what was coming. His mother took the chair opposite while John remained standing, a silent pillar of support. "You know I worked as a servant in a noble household before you were born," Amanda said quietly. "What I never told you was which household. I worked in the Duke Blackwood's manor, in the capital city of Thornhaven." Blackwood. Jack's middle name. He'd always assumed it was a family name from his mother's side, something traditional. Now, hearing it connected to a duke, warning bells began ringing in his mind. "I was young," Amanda continued, her voice steady but pained. "Only 17. And the duke, he was kind to me. Kinder than a noble had any reason to be to a servant girl. We talked late at night when I was cleaning the library. He told me about his dreams for the duchy, about the weight of responsibility he carried. And I fell in love with him. Jack's hands gripped the arms of his chair. Mom? Let me finish. Please. Amanda's eyes glistened, but she pushed forward. It was foolish. I knew it even then. But when I discovered I was carrying his child, carrying you, I thought perhaps. She shook her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. What matters is that when I told him, he gave me money and told me to leave. To go far away and never speak of it. He had a wife, you see. A marriage arranged for political alliance. If word got out about a bastard son. The word hit Jack like a physical blow. Bastard. Illegitimate. The son of a duke and a servant, unwanted and hidden away. Duke Blackwood is your father, Amanda said, and there was apology and pain in every syllable. That's why I came to Millbrook as far from the capital as I could manage. Why I took the name Black, part of his name but disguised. Why I met John and married him and built a new life where no one would ask questions about your parentage. Does he know? Jack's voice came out rough. Does the Duke know about me? He knew I was pregnant when I left. But I never contacted him again, never asked for anything. As far as he knows, you could be dead or raised in obscurity somewhere. I doubt he's given you a thought in 16 years. Jack looked at John, who met his gaze steadily. And you? You knew all this. From the start, John confirmed. Your mother told me everything before we married. I chose to be your father, Jack. By choice if not by blood. That's never changed. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Jack's mind raced, trying to process this revelation. Duke Blackwood. One of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. His father. A man who had paid his mother to disappear, who had never once tried to find him or acknowledge him. Why tell me now? Jack asked finally. Amanda leaned forward, her expression intense. Because of your magic. Life and death magic manifesting together, that's extraordinary, Jack. Word will spread. It probably already has spread, through guild networks and merchant gossips. Sooner or later, someone will make inquiries. Someone will dig into your background. And if they discover the truth, they'll know I'm the Duke's bastard, Jack finished. And that becomes a political problem. Or an opportunity, John said grimly. There are factions that would love to have leverage over Duke Blackwood. Others who might see you as a threat to his legitimate heir. You need to be careful, Jack. The world of nobility isn't like Millbrook. It's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with monsters or dungeons. Jack stood abruptly, needing to move to process. He walked to the window and stared out at the darkened street. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away in the capital city, there was a man who shared his blood. A man who had powerful magic. The Duke's family was famous for their earth and fire affinities, which was why they controlled the iron-rich mountains of the northern duchy. Life and death magic. Neither of those came from earth or fire. Which meant, what magic did you have? Jack asked his mother. Before it manifested. Your full abilities, not just what you showed people. There was a pause, and when Amanda spoke, her voice was small. Minor life magic. Very minor. Enough to help plants grow, to ease small hurts. Nothing like what you have. Life magic from his mother. And death magic from, where? Duke Blackwood's line didn't carry that affinity. Which meant Jack's magical combination was either a complete anomaly, or there was something about his lineage he still didn't know. And the Techno-mage ability, that was uniquely his, appearing on his personal magic list where no one else could see it. Where had that come from? I'm still me, Jack said quietly, still staring out the window. Knowing who my biological father is doesn't change that. I'm still Jack Black. Still the son of Amanda and John Black, brother to Emma. Still an adventurer heading to the academy in the morning. He turned to face his parents and saw relief flood his mother's face. But thank you for telling me. I needed to know. Amanda stood and crossed to him, pulling him into an embrace. I'm sorry I kept it from you so long. I was just trying to protect you. I know, Mom. Jack held her tightly, then extended an arm to John, who joined the embrace with his characteristic gruffness. When they finally separated, Amanda wiped her eyes. There's one more thing. A letter. She pulled a sealed envelope from her pocket, yellowed with age. The Duke gave this to me when I left. He told me to give it to you if you ever manifested significant magic. I've carried it for 16 years, never opening it. Jack took the letter, feeling its weight. The seal bore the Blackwood crest, a tower crowned with flames. He could break it open right now, read whatever justification or instruction his biological father had left. But something stopped him. I'll read it, Jack said, tucking it into his belt pouch. But later. When I'm ready. The next morning came too quickly. Jack's travel pack was already prepared. Spare clothes, basic supplies, his weapons carefully secured. The academy would provide meals and lodging, but students were expected to bring their own equipment for training. His new bow was strapped to the pack, along with a quiver of arrows John had fletched personally. His short sword hung at his hip in a plain leather scabbard. Emma cried when it was time to leave, clinging to Jack despite her earlier proclamations that she was too old for such displays. "You'll write, won't you? Tell me about all the adventures?" "Every week," Jack promised, though he knew letters from the academy were sporadic at best. "And I'll bring you back something special. Maybe a monster core if I find a pretty one." "I want a dragon scale," Emma declared, sniffling. "Or a phoenix feather." "Those don't exist, Em." "They might. The world's big and full of strange things. You might find one." Jack smiled and kissed the top of her head. "If I find a phoenix feather, it's yours." His mother's farewell was quieter but no less emotional. She held him for a long moment, whispering blessings and cautions in equal measure. When she pulled back, she pressed something into his hand, a small stone on a leather cord. "It's a ward stone," she explained. "Not much, just what my magic could manage. But it should warn you if someone means you harm. Wear it always." Jack slipped the cord over his head, tucking the stone beneath his shirt where it rested warm against his chest. "Thank you, Mom." John walked with him to the edge of town, where the road stretched north toward the academy. They'd said their important goodbyes at home, but Jack appreciated the company for these final steps. "You're a good man, Jack," John said as they reached the boundary marker. "Better than you know. That's not because of whose blood runs in your veins, but because of the choices you've made. Remember that when things get hard." "I will." Jack clasped John's forearm in the warrior's grip. "Take care of them. Always." John's smile was sad but genuine. "Now go. Show those academy brats what a blacksmith's son can do." Jack shouldered his pack and started walking. He didn't look back, that would have made it harder, but he carried the warmth of his family's love with him like armor against whatever lay ahead. The road to the academy was well traveled, and Jack fell in with other youths making the same journey. Some were clearly from wealthy families, their equipment new and expensive, their attitudes confident to the point of arrogance. Others, like Jack, came from more modest backgrounds, their gear serviceable but worn, their expressions mixing excitement with apprehension. By midday, Jack had fallen into step with a group of 5 others heading to the same destination. They swapped stories of their magical manifestations: a girl with water affinity who could already create ice crystals, a boy with earth magic who planned to become a defensive specialist, others with fire or wind or minor combinations. When they asked about Jack's magic, he kept his answer vague. "Life and death," he said simply, and that was enough to earn impressed looks and curious questions he deflected politely. He didn't mention the Techno-mage ability. That secret felt too important to share, even with potential fellow students. The academy itself came into view as the sun began its descent toward evening. It sprawled across a hilltop, surrounded by a wooden palisade that looked sturdy despite its age. Beyond the walls, Jack could see multiple buildings: dormitories, training halls, what looked like an administrative center with the guild's banner flying from its roof. And beyond the academy, perhaps a mile distant, Jack could see the dark mouth of a dungeon entrance. Even from this distance, he could feel something about it, a subtle wrongness in the air, like a discordant note that only he could hear. His Techno-mage sense tingled, responding to something in or near the dungeon that called to it. The group reached the main gates as dusk fell, where a stern-faced woman with a clipboard checked names against a list. When Jack gave his name, her eyebrows rose slightly. "Black? The dual affinity?" "Yes, ma'am." She made a mark on her clipboard. "You'll be in dormitory 3, room 12. Your roommates are already assigned. Report to the administration building tomorrow at dawn for orientation. Don't be late." Jack nodded and followed the stream of new students through the gates. The academy grounds were larger than they'd appeared from the outside, with paved paths connecting the various buildings. Crystal lamps provided light as darkness fell, and Jack could see older students moving about, some still in training gear despite the hour. Dormitory 3 was easy to find, a 3-story stone building with numbered doors. Jack climbed to the second floor and found room 12. He hesitated for just a moment before the door, wondering what kind of people he'd be sharing space with for the next several months, then pushed it open. The room was modest but functional, with 4 beds for lockers, a shared study table, and a window overlooking the training yards. 2 of the beds were already claimed, their owners' belongings neatly arranged. As Jack stepped inside, a voice called out from one of them. Finally. We were wondering when our other roommates would show up. A girl sat cross-legged on one of the beds, and Jack found himself staring. She had short red hair that stuck up in wild spikes, pale skin dotted with freckles across her nose and cheeks, and brilliant green eyes that sparkled with mischief. She wore practical training clothes and had a sword and shield propped against the wall near her bed. "I'm Elizabeth Tamwood," she announced, hopping down from the bed with athletic grace. "But everyone calls me Lizzie. Earth and fire magic, future greatest knight in the kingdom, and your new roommate." "Well, dormmate. Roommate sounds weird when you're a girl and I'm talking to a guy." She stuck out her hand and Jack shook it, finding her grip surprisingly strong. "Jack Black. Life and death magic. Future adventurer?" Lizzie's eyes widened. "Life and death? Both? That's insane. I heard there was someone with that combination registering this year, but I didn't think we'd be in the same dorm." She turned toward the second claimed bed. "Ash, get out here, our other roommate is the legendary dual affinity guy." From behind a changing screen in the corner, a melodious voice responded. "I'm decent, give me a moment." A figure emerged and Jack felt his breath catch for the second time. The girl who stepped into view had long silver hair that cascaded down her back in soft waves, tan skin that seemed to glow in the lamplight, and the most striking feature of all, ears that were human in shape but came to a subtle point at the tips. A half-elf. She wore a simple robe and carried a staff of polished wood that hummed with latent magic. "Ash White," she introduced herself with a small, graceful curtsy that seemed almost instinctive. "Life and wind magic. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jack Black." Her voice was soft but clear, with a cultured accent that suggested noble upbringing. Her eyes, a pale gray that reminded Jack of storm clouds, studied him with open curiosity. "Two life mages in one room," Lizzie crowed. "That's lucky. Means when I get banged up in training, you two can patch me back together." "That's not really how it works," Ash said gently, but she was smiling. "Life magic isn't instant healing. It takes concentration and—" Yeah, I know. You explained already." Lizzie bounced on her toes, clearly full of energy despite the long day of travel. "So Jack, what's your weapon specialty?" "I saw the bow and sword. Ranger type." "Something like that," Jack said, still processing the fact that he'd just met two girls who would apparently be sharing living space with him. The academy must have co-ed arrangements, which was practical but still felt strange after living in a household with clear gender divisions. "I'm comfortable at range and close quarters both." "Versatile. Smart." Lizzie nodded approvingly. "Ash is pure support, no offense, Ash." "None taken," Ash said serenely. "And I'm pure frontline aggression. You being able to do both makes us a pretty balanced group if we end up teaming for exercises." "Are teams assigned?" Jack asked, claiming the third bed and beginning to unpack his gear. "Randomly for most things," Ash explained, settling gracefully into a chair at the study table. "But for the final examination, the dungeon clearance, we get to choose our own parties of 3 or 4. That's still months away though." Jack hung his bow on the hooks provided and stowed his pack in the locker. The room already felt less lonely with these two here, Lizzie with her infectious energy and Ash with her calm presence. They were different from each other in almost every way, but somehow the dynamic felt right. "So," Lizzie said, flopping back onto her bed, "what's the deal with death magic? Can you, like, kill things by touching them? Make zombies? That would be so useful in dungeons. Imagine just reanimating the monsters to fight for you." "Lizzie." Ash looked scandalized. "That's incredibly rude to ask someone you just met." "What?" "It's a practical question." Jack found himself smiling despite the personal nature of the question. "I don't really know yet. My magic only manifested 3 days ago. I can feel it, both the life and death aspects, but I haven't had any real training." "That's what we're all here for," Ash said warmly. "To learn how to use our gifts properly. I've had minor training from my mother, but nothing formal. This will be new for all of us." The fourth bed remained unclaimed as the evening wore on, and eventually the three of them settled into their respective spaces. Lizzie produced a whetstone and began sharpening her sword with practiced motions. Ash pulled out a book and began reading by the light of a personal lamp crystal. Jack examined his bow, checking the string tension and making minor adjustments. It felt surreal. This morning he'd been in Millbrook, saying goodbye to his family. Now he was in a dormitory at an adventurer's academy, sharing space with a minor noble and a half-elf, preparing to learn how to delve dungeons and fight monsters. And in his belt pouch, still sealed, rested a letter from a duke who had never wanted him. Jack pushed that thought aside. Tomorrow would bring orientation, the beginning of training, and the first steps toward understanding what it meant to be an adventurer. Tonight he would rest and prepare. Through the window he could see the dark mouth of the distant dungeon, and once again felt that strange pull, his techno-mage sense recognizing something it couldn't quite identify. Soon he would explore that dungeon as part of his final examination. Soon he would discover what secrets it held. But tonight, Jack Black was simply a student, surrounded by new companions, standing on the threshold of a future he couldn't yet imagine. Outside, the autumn wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of adventure and the whisper of challenges yet to come. Chapter 4. First Lessons. Dawn came early at the academy, announced by a bell that clanged with enough volume to wake the dead. Jack jolted upright in bed, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before memory reasserted itself. Across the room, Lizzie groaned and pulled her pillow over her head. 5 more minutes, she mumbled. The orientation begins in 30 minutes, Ash said, already dressed in fresh training clothes, her silver hair braided neatly down her back. We need to eat and report to the administration building. Ash, how are you already awake and perfect looking? Lizzie threw her pillow at the half-elf, who caught it with a small smile. It's unnatural. Elven blood, Ash replied serenely. We require less sleep. Jack pulled himself out of bed and grabbed his training clothes from the locker. The academy had provided each student with 2 sets, sturdy gray tunics and trousers designed to withstand rough use. As he dressed, he noticed Lizzie watching him from her bed, not bothering to hide her curiosity. What? Jack asked. Just wondering if death magic makes you all pale and creepy looking. You know, like in the stories. She grinned. But you look pretty normal. Disappointingly normal, actually. Sorry to disappoint. Oh, I'm sure you'll do something impressive eventually. Lizzie finally dragged herself out of bed, stretching with the unself-consciousness of someone who'd grown up training with soldiers. Come on, let's get food. I can't learn anything on an empty stomach. The dining hall was already crowded with students when they arrived, a cavernous space filled with long tables and benches. The smell of porridge, fresh bread, and frying bacon made Jack's stomach growl. They joined the queue and received generous portions from the kitchen staff, then found seats at one of the less crowded tables. So, Lizzie said around a mouthful of bread, what do you think orientation will be? Boring speeches about rules and regulations, probably. Almost certainly, Ash agreed, eating with considerably more grace. But also important. We need to understand the academy's structure and expectations. Jack ate quietly, observing the other students. Most seemed to be around 16, with a handful of older students who must have failed the previous year's examination and were retaking the course. There were humans, a few dwarves with their characteristic stocky builds and elaborate beards, and even a pair of elves who sat apart from everyone else, their postures radiating superiority. Those 2 are from the Silverleaf clan, Ash said quietly, noticing Jack's gaze. Pure-blood elves. Very traditional. They probably aren't happy about being here with short-lived races. Stuck-up jerks, you mean? Lizzie said bluntly. I tried talking to them yesterday. They looked at me like I was something stuck to their boot. They looked at me like I was an abomination, Ash said with a slight edge to her voice. Half-breeds aren't well regarded by pure-blood elven society. Jack caught the pain beneath her calm words. Their loss, he said. Prejudice is just another word for stupidity. Ash's expression softened, and she gave him a grateful smile. Thank you, Jack. The bell rang again, signaling 10 minutes until orientation. The 3 of them finished their meals and made their way to the administration building, joining the stream of students flowing through its wide doors. Inside, they found themselves in a large auditorium with tiered seating facing a raised platform. Jack, Lizzie, and Ash found seats together near the middle, close enough to see and hear clearly but not so close as to draw unwanted attention. The room gradually filled until every seat was occupied. Jack estimated nearly 200 students in total. Then a door at the back of the platform opened and a figure strode out. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with steel-gray hair cut military short and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore the formal uniform of a guild master, deep blue with silver trim, and moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death and survived. Most striking were his eyes, a pale blue that seemed to pierce through anyone they landed on. I am Guildmaster Aldrich Stone, the man said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space without need for magical amplification. I run this academy, and for the next 6 months your success or failure is my responsibility. Some of you will graduate. Many of you will not. That is simply the reality of this profession. The room fell into absolute silence. "This is not a noble's finishing school," Aldrich continued. "This is not a place where you will be coddled or protected from harsh truths. You are here to learn how to enter dungeons, fight monsters, and emerge alive with enough loot to make it worthwhile. Dungeons do not care about your feelings. Monsters do not care about your potential. Death is always one mistake away." He paused, letting that sink in. "You will be divided into training groups based on your magical affinities and combat roles. Frontline fighters, range specialists, support mages, versatile combatants. Each group will receive specialized instruction. You will also attend general classes on dungeon ecology, monster identification, equipment maintenance, and survival skills." Aldrich began pacing the platform. "In addition to your daily training, you will participate in practical exercises. These will increase in difficulty as the months progress. Your final examination will be a supervised dungeon clearance. You will form parties of 3 to 4 members and clear a 10-rank dungeon from entrance to core. Success means graduation and official recognition as F-rank adventurers. Failure means you return next year to try again, assuming you survive the attempt." Jack felt Lizzie tense beside him. Ash's face had gone pale. Around the auditorium, other students shifted nervously. "Do not mistake 10 rank for safe," Aldrich warned. "Dungeons are inherently dangerous. Even the lowest-ranked dungeons kill careless adventurers every year. But they are also the foundation of our economy and our survival as a species. The materials, cores, and ancient technology recovered from dungeons fuel our civilization. Without adventurers, humanity would have collapsed long ago." The guildmaster stopped pacing and fixed the assembled students with that piercing gaze. "You are here because you manifested magic. That makes you valuable. But magic alone does not make you an adventurer. Courage, intelligence, teamwork, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes, these are what separate the living from the dead." He gestured to the side of the auditorium, where Jack now noticed several instructors standing at attention. "These are your teachers. They are all veteran adventurers ranging from B rank to A rank. They have survived encounters that would kill you 10 times over. Listen to them. Learn from them. And perhaps you will live long enough to tell your own stories." Aldrich's expression softened slightly, though his voice remained firm. "I do not say these things to frighten you. I say them because I respect you enough to be honest. You have chosen a dangerous path, but it is also a noble one. Adventurers are the backbone of our society. You protect towns from monster incursions. You recover resources that cannot be obtained any other way. You preserve knowledge from the old world that would otherwise be lost forever." He straightened to his full height. "Welcome to the Millbrook Adventurers Academy. May you prove worthy of the trust placed in you." With that, Aldrich strode from the platform, leaving the students in stunned silence. After a moment, one of the instructors, a woman with burned scars along one side of her face, stepped forward. "My name is Instructor Thorne," she announced. "When I call your name, stand and move to the designated area. We will be sorting you into your training groups now." The process took the better part of an hour. Names were called, students stood and moved to different sections of the auditorium. Jack noted the pattern. Frontline fighters grouped together, range specialists in another area, support mages in a third. Versatile students like himself ended up in a fourth group that seemed to be for those who didn't fit neatly into a single category. Elizabeth Tamwood, Frontline Fighter Group. Lizzie stood with a grin, shooting Jack and Ash a quick wave before joining the cluster of students carrying swords, axes, and shields. Ash White, Support Magic Group. Ash rose gracefully, her staff in hand, and moved to join the other support mages. She glanced back at Jack with an encouraging smile. When Jack's name was called, Jack Black, Versatile Combat Group. He noticed heads turning, whispers spreading. The dual affinity. The legendary combination. He kept his expression neutral as he joined his assigned group, which included about 30 other students with varied equipment and magical abilities. Once everyone was sorted, the instructors moved among the groups, explaining schedules and expectations. Jack's instructor was a lean man with dark skin and calculating eyes who introduced himself as Instructor Marcus Vale, B-rank adventurer and specialist in adaptive combat. Versatile fighters are the backbone of any balanced party, Vale explained to his group. You can fill multiple roles as needed: damage, support, crowd control. Your training will be the most demanding because you need to maintain competency in multiple areas rather than mastering a single one. He outlined their schedule. Mornings would be dedicated to magical training and theory, afternoons to physical combat and weapons practice, evenings to general education classes. One day per week would be devoted to practical exercises in controlled dungeon environments. You will be expected to maintain your equipment, study independently, and constantly push your limits, Vale continued. Versatile fighters who slack off end up mediocre at everything and excellent at nothing. That gets you killed. The morning session began immediately after orientation concluded. Jack found himself in a training yard with his group, standing in a loose circle as Vale demonstrated basic magical exercises. Before you can use your magic effectively in combat, you must understand it intimately, Vale explained. Today we begin with sensing your magical core. He had them sit cross-legged on the ground, eyes closed, focusing inward. Your core is located roughly in the center of your chest. It's where your magical energy pools and flows from. Some of you may feel it as warmth, others as pressure or tingling. The sensation varies by individual and magical type. Jack closed his eyes and turned his attention inward, past his physical awareness of breath and heartbeat. At first there was nothing. Then gradually he began to perceive it, a presence in his chest that felt like two opposing forces held in delicate balance. One was warm and bright, pulsing with the rhythm of life and growth. The other was cool and dark, steady and patient, carrying the weight of endings and transformation. Life and death held in equilibrium. Good, Vale's voice cut through Jack's concentration. I can see several of you have found your course. Now very carefully try to draw a small amount of energy from your core and direct it to your hand. Just a trickle. We're not trying to cast spells yet, merely establishing the pathways. Jack focused on the life aspect first, instinctively understanding it would be easier to control. He visualized drawing a thread of that warm energy from his core, guiding it through his body to his right hand. For a moment nothing happened. Then his palm began to glow with a faint white light. Excellent, Black, Vale said, stopping beside him. That's a strong initial manifestation. Now maintain it for a count of 10, then release it back to your core. Jack held the energy steady, feeling the slight drain on his reserves. It wasn't difficult exactly, but it required constant focus. At 10 he released it and the light faded. The energy flowed back to his core and he felt a small surge of satisfaction. Now try your other affinity, Vale instructed. Jack hesitated, then reached for the dark aspect. This energy felt different, heavier, more reluctant to move. He coaxed it forward carefully, guiding it to his left hand. When it manifested, his palm dimmed slightly, as if light itself was being drawn away from it. The sensation was unsettling but not unpleasant. Interesting, Vale murmured. Death magic doesn't usually manifest as visible darkness at the basic level. You've got significant potential in both aspects, Black. Keep practicing. The morning session continued with increasingly complex exercises. By the time the lunch bell rang, Jack was mentally exhausted, though he'd barely moved physically. Around him, other students looked similarly drained. A few had failed to manifest their magic at all, despite Vale's patient instruction, and were being taken aside for remedial work. Jack met up with Lizzie and Ash at the dining hall, where they compared their morning experiences over generous portions of stew and bread. We spent 3 hours just on defensive stances, Lizzie groaned, massaging her shoulders. My instructor is this dwarf named Iron Hammer, and I swear he's made of actual iron. He kept whacking me with a practice sword every time my guard dropped. I'm going to be covered in bruises. At least you were doing something active, Ash said. We spent the entire morning meditating and doing breathing exercises. I understand it's important for controlling magical flow, but it was incredibly tedious. I think I prefer being mentally exhausted to physically battered, Jack admitted, but just barely. Wait until this afternoon, Lizzie said darkly. I heard the versatile group does double training, magical practice in the morning, then weapons and physical conditioning in the afternoon. You're going to get both. She was right. The afternoon session was brutal. Instructor Vale drove them through weapons drills, teaching proper form for various weapons. Jack's experience with the bow served him well, but sword work was different from what John had taught him in the forge. Vale's style emphasized speed and efficiency over power, using the opponent's momentum against them. You're a technician, Black, Vale observed after watching Jack spar with a practice dummy. Good fundamentals, steady control. But you're too cautious. In a real fight, hesitation gets you killed. You need to commit to your strikes. Jack nodded, adjusting his approach. The next series of strikes came faster, harder, and Vale grunted approval. Physical conditioning followed weapons practice. Running laps around the training yard, climbing ropes, lifting weights. By the time Vale finally dismissed them, Jack's muscles burned and his hands were raw despite the calluses from forge work. He stumbled to the dining hall for dinner, where he found Lizzie and Ash already seated and looking equally exhausted. "I take back what I said," Ash groaned, barely picking at her food. "They made us practice continuous healing spells on wounded animals. Do you know how much concentration it takes to knit together a rabbit's broken leg? And we did it for 4 hours straight." "At least rabbits don't fight back," Lizzie said. She had a spectacular bruise forming on her left cheek. "Iron Hammer made us spar against second-year students for practical experience. I got my ass handed to me 6 different ways." They sat in companionable misery, too tired for much conversation. Around them, other first-year students looked similarly beaten down. This was only the first day, Jack realized. They had 6 months of this ahead of them. But beneath the exhaustion he felt something else, a sense of progress, of purpose. His body ached, but he'd successfully channeled both his life and death magic. His sword arm was sore, but his form had improved under Vale's instruction. This was what he'd come here for. After dinner they attended their first general education class. Monster identification, taught by an enthusiastic scholar named Professor Helena Marsh. She filled the lecture hall's chalkboard with sketches of various monsters, explaining their behaviors, weaknesses, and the materials that could be harvested from them. "The goblins you'll encounter in tin-rank dungeons are relatively simple creatures," Professor Marsh explained, tapping a chalk drawing of a squat, ugly humanoid. "They have basic pack tactics and crude weapons, but they're cowardly when faced with organized resistance. However, even a goblin can kill you if you're careless. They often carry rusty blades that cause infection, and they're known to set traps." Jack took notes on his crystal tablet, which had a function for recording text through magical dictation. Around him, other students did the same, some with greater success than others. Beside him, Lizzie had fallen asleep despite her best efforts, her head nodding forward until Ash gently elbowed her awake. By the time the evening class ended and they returned to their dormitory, Jack was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. He managed to strip off his training clothes and collapse into bed before sleep claimed him immediately. His dreams were strange and fragmented. He stood in a vast chamber filled with machines that hummed with purpose, their functions incomprehensible yet somehow familiar. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, lined with glowing panels that whispered in a language he almost understood. And beneath it all, a presence, vast and patient, neither malevolent nor benevolent, simply waiting. Waiting for what, Jack didn't know. He woke to the bell announcing dawn, every muscle in his body screaming protest. Across the room Lizzie's groan was loud enough to wake the dead. "Please tell me it gets easier," she mumbled. "It gets easier," Ash said, though her own movement suggested she was equally sore. "That's what I'm choosing to believe anyway." Jack pulled himself upright and reached for his training clothes. Day 2 of academy life, and he was already wondering if he'd survive to see day 3. But as he dressed and prepared for another day of training, he felt that strange sense from his dreams lingering, that awareness of systems and structures, of purpose embedded in ancient machines. His Techno-mage ability, still unnamed and unexplained to anyone else, stirred at the edge of his consciousness. The academy's nearby dungeon called to something in him, and Jack knew that eventually he would have to answer. But for now there were classes to attend, skills to learn, and the simple challenge of surviving another day of training. Jack headed to breakfast with Lizzie and Ash, ready to face whatever the academy threw at them next.